My next guest is a numbers guy. He's also an adjunct professor, so he's got some great insight on this. That's one thing we both have in common. I was an adjunct professor of finance too in Chicago at the DePaul University. I appreciate Dan Geltrude coming on, and welcome Dan to the show. Happy Monday to you. Yeah, it sounds like you got some decent insight into this. But number two is, you got kids too, and it's an interesting conversation to have with young ones.
Well, to start with, unfortunately, my kids are already out of school, so I've already paid that price tag. But let's go down the path here, Scott, of the price tag. And the truth of the matter is that the math just doesn't work, right? Because tuition has absolutely skyrocketed, as everyone knows, but the starting salaries haven't kept pace, right? So you have to really look at, like with everything else, being me and you are finance guys, the return on investment here has literally collapsed, in my judgment, right? Because you have graduates that are in tens of thousands of dollars of debt, and they don't really have the necessary job skills. And I could tell you right now is that employers are looking far more for skills and experience and the ability to learn than they're looking for just the diploma.
Let's pull this ugly economic story over to the side of the road for a second, because you mentioned tuition has been skyrocketing, and you're right. What you get, the bang for your buck, is no longer there anymore. Return on investment's horrible, and that's because of one thing, if you ask me. The government got in the business of these loans, and so when you've got a government there that wants to give these kids any amount of money that they want, basically, what do you think these schools do for the price of an education? If I'm in the business of selling golf balls, and the government gives everybody in the country a loan to buy golf balls, what am I going to do to the price of my golf balls? I mean, I don't understand why anybody can't make that leap. So the government getting into the loan market has really been the reason why this stuff has gone out of control to the upside. Tuition and the cost of it is insane. We have to get the government out of the borrowing or the lending business, and so that we can bring some of these prices down. And I'm afraid they probably won't come down. But everybody needs to know that the culprit here is the government has exploded the price of college. It just made it not worth it, right?
Yeah, I could not agree more with what you're saying, although I don't think they're the entire reason, but they are a big part of it. And you know what happens here, Scott, is that the colleges and the universities actually have no skin in the game. Why? Because their payment is guaranteed. Right now, all the students out there, and I feel bad for them to a certain extent, they've taken on all this debt, which they can't get out of, right? So you're on the hook for that, period. And when you go out in the job world and you didn't think through your return on investment, because Scott, that's the key, and that's where we have to hold these students accountable to some extent, even though I get they're 18 and it is somewhat a lot to expect. But you got to look at this and say, okay, I'm going to have to pay now or later for this education. What am I going to get back? Am I ever going to recoup the money that I've had to pay for education? In some cases, the answer is no. And you know what happens, Scott? They end up going back for a master's degree in a different major to try to get a job. And then they're really in the hole, twice as deep.
Right, because then, I mean, look, you come out of school with a $200,000 loan that you need to pay off, and you're a gender studies major. I mean, there's no chance you're going to get, there's no way you're going to be able to make that money back in gender studies or underwater BB stacking or whatever garbage, you chose to major in, because they need to be able to make sure that when they're loaning these children at the time, the money, they have a chance at least of, with whatever their major may be, of making the money back. Because we're saddling these people with so much debt. I had a guy on the show probably about, he's on every week, but he mentioned to us he's a retirement guy. And he said the biggest reason why people can't get on the housing market ladder is because of the debt that they're saddled with out of universities. Every bank looks at that. And if you without anything else on, you've got $2,500, $3,000 you got to pay the government every month because of some student loan you took out to be your gender studies major. That's a problem. So I think that the government needs to be if they want to stay in the business of lending, we need to be able to change the interest rates on some things to force people into things that they might not normally be in. For instance, if you want to be that gender studies major, your interest rate on that loan's got to be 15%. If you want to go into something high tech, it should be 2%. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, and some people are going to write into my social media. It's been done before. But I think that we have to start graduating things we need instead of saddling these people with debt on things we don't need. I'm going to leave it to you before we go.
All right, so let's take that model. If you're going to try to buy a house, Scott, and you can't afford that mortgage, what happens? You get turned down. So even if we just take that model related to student debt and you say, listen, if you want to be a specific major, right, this is how much we're going to lend you to be in that major because of the return on investment. So, for example, if you want to be in a certain major, you got to go to a state university or a community college because that's what will fit in terms of the return on investment, not a private, really expensive university where you're never going to be able to recoup that money based upon the field you're going in. So that's another way to address this.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. You're the solution man today. That's awesome stuff, Dan. Thank you very much for coming on. It was a perfect thing to have with you. Perfect talk you had with you to have with you. I appreciate you coming on Monday, getting our week started off on the right foot. Dan Geltrude, he's in Nutley, New Jersey, with Geltrude Accounting. Thanks for being on the show, Dan.